Today I'm joined by Bryan Reid. After earning an education at UBC and St. John's University School of Law, Bryan began his business career working as an acquisitions analyst and retail leasing manager at JPI, a business consulting firm. He then worked for Colliers International as a senior manager, focusing on commercial leasing and investment brokerage consulting in China. In 2011, he joined Kindred Construction and became president of the company in 2018. Kindred has completed over $2 billion worth of projects across the market sectors they serve and is a major player in the Lower Mainland construction space. On today's show, we'll be focusing on three key issues in the construction industry: labor supply, approvals and permitting for new projects, and bottlenecks related to BC Hydro. Bryan Reid, welcome to Coastal Front.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, great. So am I. As I was saying just before we started filming, the closest I've got in our over 5 years of history of interviewing guests here in the Lower Mainland that are in the construction space is either a well-spoken realtor like Steve Soretsky, or we also had, of course, Chip Wilson came on and talked a bit about his experience of building locally here, both in BC and Washington State. So we're really excited to have a fellow like yourself who's deep into this. You're on the ground, you know what's going on, because housing and construction as a whole is a big topic across the nation and certainly here in Metro Vancouver. Before we dive into these three topics, for the listeners who might not be familiar with yourself or Kindred Construction, can you enlighten us a little bit about your company?
Sure. Myself personally, there's not too long of a story with where I fit into the construction market here in Vancouver. I was raised in a construction family, but didn't really take an interest in it until far later in life. My dad spent most of my childhood convincing me not to get into construction. And here I am. I find myself doing it this many years later. So Kindred was formed in 1980 by my father and my mom. They started as a group based out of an attic and building high-end custom renovation work primarily in the west side of Vancouver. And we grew, obviously, quite considerably since then. My dad kept a bespoke fit around his company up until 2011 when I joined, and I had a little bit more ambition for the growth of the company at that point, and we elected to see what we could do to put it into hyperdrive, and it's been an enjoyable 14, 15-year run. We've obviously been a part of a very buoyant market that has allowed a lot of boats to rise along with this tide. So we are a builder that spans the market quite considerably. We have two independent groups within our company. We have a Kindred Custom Homes brand, which focuses on the ultra high-end bespoke custom home segment throughout the province of BC. And then outside of that, we have what I will loosely term our commercial enterprise, which is focused on everything outside of that space. So while we do restaurants and retrofits and car dealerships, working with groups like DeLowry and Cactus Club, where we have found our feet is primarily in the housing space. We've become quite well known as a mid-rise boutique infill builder. Our projects are focused in that space up to about 350 units.
And sorry, what does infill builder mean? What does that mean?
So we're primarily a downtown-driven group. We haven't done a lot of sort of land development or work outside where we're servicing areas. We go into a space within a metro area.
That means like a tight area where
exactly.
You're kind of taking an old building out and
exactly right.
Or a couple buildings. Okay.
Yeah. Some projects that might be recognizable with our brand, although we are a group that flies a little bit under the radar. We're doing two of the largest mass timber buildings globally. Currently, the two largest mass timber buildings under construction in Canada.
Wow.
One of them is on the corner of Burrard and Davie. Another one is on St. George, just out of Lonsdale in North Vancouver. Where we have found a lot of success for our group recently is sort of matching our ethos on being a home builder and a group that is focused on helping solve some of the issues that our communities are facing. And so we're working closely with a lot of not-for-profits, BC Housing, CMHC-driven work. And those projects span anywhere from Sunshine Coast, Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley, sea to sky, and then up into Northwest Territories. And we'll be doing some work in Alberta in the coming months as well.
Okay. Well, that's a great overview. Thank you for that. Maybe to speak about some of your other projects that maybe you've done in the past. So you mentioned you're working on these two mass timber projects, one of them on the corner of Davie and
Burrard.
But what are some other locations that, if you're commuting, living in the Lower Mainland or Metro Vancouver, we might be familiar with?
Well, unfortunately, we're not quite there with the groups that are building projects like this lovely office building that we're in. Nothing as landmark driven as the Stack. But if you use the Cambie Street Bridge, there's a building that looks like a sail. It's designed by Arno Madison. It looks like a white, and it's homage to sails and the ships.
Yeah,
so we've built that building off the corner of there.
Yeah.
We did Cactus Club in Cole Harbour, where a lot of people have, eaten and drink.
You guys built that one?
We did.
Yeah.
That was a fun project.
Yeah.
And Bryan Adams' studio in Gastown, we did that years and years ago. I think that's probably it.
Those are some good names.
Yeah, visible projects anyways. We tend to do those things that are a little bit off the beaten track.
Yeah, great. Before we jump into these topics, for those listeners probably like myself who don't understand the sort of titling of different entities within the building sector, you've got developers or builders, and then you have, but you're not in that category, right?
No, we're not a developer.
So you're a builder, or you're a how would you describe yourself in the industry?
A punching bag. So we're a builder, construction manager, general contractor. And so the differentiation between construction manager and general contracting is typically just a contractual one.
Okay.
Our role and our requirements to help shepherd a project through completion do not change, but our liabilities and our responsibilities contractually, both with the owner and the trades, do.
Okay.
But we're responsible for taking somebody's concept that they've driven with an architect and giving them a set of keys as quickly as possible.
Okay. All right. So you're almost like the factory that builds the car.
That's exactly right.
Right. Okay. Great. That's a good perspective. So if we think about some bigger names in the industry like West Bank or Concord Pacific, they're not necessarily just GC, like general contractors. They're considered builders, right?
Yeah, there will be developers throughout any market that are vertically integrated that have their own construction arm.
Right. So the really big ones would probably be in that case, right?
Yeah, I think that it tends to be a business decision for a lot of these groups. So one of the larger developers here locally is PCI.
Yes.
They do not build their own work. And so they've got relationships with varying contractors, a close one that goes back with Ledcor decades.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they've elected to run their business and to offload the responsibility for construction. Conversely, you'll have a group like Boza with either Boza Construction or Axiom, where there's a very close relationship familially, and that's a vertical integration.
Okay.
And then you've got Concord that they've got every single person within their shop.
Okay. That's really helpful. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Okay, let's jump to this first topic about labor shortage. If we think about the concept of labor shortage, it wasn't just, it was a short while ago that, we went with this wild time from, COVID where no one had a job because everybody was at home and trying to deal with this pandemic, to then we come back to this huge, surge in activity, and we see labor shortages across all industries. I'll recall a restaurant that was in Kitsilano area, and they had an advertisement to hire a full-time dishwasher for $45,000 a year as a salary, and this was only a couple of years ago. Now, of course, we've seen Canada's unemployment rate go up to over 7%. Now it's different than the United States, and so it seems like labor supply isn't the issue that it was a couple of years ago. But I don't get the sense that that's necessarily the case in the construction sector.
No.
Not at all?
No, not at all.
Okay. I know you've got some points of view in this. I want to quickly just reference a data point that Arjun put together here. So according to the BC Independent Contractors and Business Association, 72% of BC contractors report facing a shortage of skilled tradespeople that is pressuring them to turn down projects and absorb rising costs. Is that a fair statement?
Very fair.
Okay. Why don't you give us some insight on what's happening here for your company in this because of this issue?
Sure. So we're finding, while there may be a temporary slowdown in large-scale significant construction projects locally, that's done very little to alleviate the group of people that we desperately need. We suffer a void and this vacuum of people being pulled out of our industry through, more attractive opportunities that might be deemed to be sort of a more long-term profession. We have a lot of people that are retiring. That was put into hyperdrive through COVID, where people from 60 years old and up elected to call it quits. And we had a very significant gap in skilled craftsmen between the ages of 40 and 60. Construction still remains one of those places where there truly is nothing that makes up for lack of experience. And that lack of experience is now crippling our industry. So we have staffed up from about 30 people to 150 over the course of the last 7 years. And that's been very challenging for us to do. Every group that I speak with that competes in our space is continuing to look for people. And even with the downturn in our industry, there's a complete lack of appropriate CVs that match the skill sets that we need. That's predominantly for a group like me, project managers and superintendents. And what we've come to appreciate is that we're seeing 27, 28-year-old folks that believe themselves to be project managers, and they're truly not close. Same would exist with a superintendent. And then outside of ourselves specifically, all of the trade partners that we work with are looking quite intently, both here locally and then having to push the boundaries and search for these appropriate candidates internationally in order to satisfy their work ranks. In almost every instance, we're short-staffed.
Really? Wow. And this doesn't sound, just how you described it, it doesn't sound to me like, Bryan, this is a issue related to just Kindred or even to Metro Vancouver. Would you suggest that this is an issue, sort of nationwide? Yeah,
I think it's industry-wide and nationwide. We had obviously this boom that's been very well reported and documented with immigration. The numbers that I have and the reports that I've read is that approximately 2% of those immigrants that were welcomed to Canada found themselves in the construction space. And so if there's 100 people that help increase our population to put additional pressure on infrastructure, hospitals, schools, and then obviously, of course, housing, having just two of those people help offset that additional need will never get us there. So we're putting ourselves further behind on the needs that we've already got.
Yeah.
What we've come to appreciate is that we just need to do things differently in order to attract people into the industry. We have to focus quite intently from high school up. We have to create partnerships with a bunch of the post-secondary facilities that are going to allow people to appreciate how good of an opportunity being in construction can be, because it's truly a remarkable space. You can accomplish and do great things, and you can be very, very well looked after financially. We need to ensure that that message is broadcast so that people want to find themselves here.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Well, I've often wondered with this mass immigration that we saw over the last couple of years. I mean, I think it was 2024. We saw, was it over 1 million people, I believe, that immigrated into Canada, and it seemed like most of them were just students, not actual people that can bring some kind of well sought after trade to do work like you're talking about. You mentioned about coming up with creative solutions to kind of address this issue. Now, I would assume that probably the first thing we should be looking at would just be, okay, well, we are going to continue to bring in immigrants. I mean, we're not a non-immigrant nation. Maybe what we need to see at a federal level, because they're the ones who control this, is a focus back on people who, I mean, I know David Eby's trying to do this right now with nurses and doctors. Right. Why don't we just see politicians and policy leaders like just shift it and say, well, we don't need more students. There's, let's get more people who can come from places that are developing nations like the Americas, Asia, maybe even Europe, that have skills like you're talking about.
Yeah. We recruit heavily internationally.
You do, hey?
Yeah, we do.
Wow, that's crazy to think that a local construction company,
Yeah.
not to minimize who, but the fact that you have to recruit internationally.
I know, for a group that staffs 150 people, you'd think that we'd be well looked after here locally.
Yeah,
regrettably,
for sure.
Regrettably, we're not. But what it's done is it's allowed us to create a great fabric within our group. We have a phenomenal number of specifically European immigrants, and that's allowed us to continue to say yes to projects that we would have had an inability to do so had we focused only locally.
Right.
I think that it's two things. It's what's going to allow somebody to land here temporarily, and then the ability for them to set down roots permanently. So somebody that is a vacation worker that wants to come for 2 years is absolutely welcome to do so. They're a benefit to our industry and to our economy. They get to experience something phenomenal. I did the exact same thing when I went to Shanghai, the exact same thing when I went to Dallas. Those are opportunities that are great. So we can support that and welcome that and foster that opinion and foster that ability. What we need to
is that under this realm of temporary foreign workers? Is that the idea?
Some of it,
okay.
And some of it is visa driven.
Okay.
Where if you have a visa here for a couple of years, then if your work permit expires, how are we going to ensure that you're able to not fear that looming date if you want to stay?
Right.
And what's happened right now on the permanent resident status is that it's made it remarkably challenging for people that are outside of very few specific jobs in order to qualify.
Right.
And so I know a lot of plumbers that are looking for staff. One of my friend's husband was a journeyman plumber, was working here for 2 years and could not seek an extension, and all of a sudden is now back in London. This just happened 3 weeks ago.
Wow, really?
And so that to me is disappointing.
Yeah.
We've got to do something.
That's a miss by our policymakers, by our government.
A total miss.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we need to identify construction in the development space because of the massive need that we have here as one of those very specific sectors that we should be targeting to allow for a closer and quicker path for people to be able to be here.
Yeah. Well, if getting people into the industry is one of the hurdles to overcome, I could see how doing work locally with post-secondary universities would be helpful. I mean, the thing that's unfortunate is today it seems like every parent's been almost brainwashed into convincing their kids the only path forward is a finance degree from Sauder, right?
Right.
Arjun?
Yeah.
He went to Sauder, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's in fact, the irony of this is the direction that AI is moving right now. A lot of those desk jobs are going to be obsolete. And that, I think one of the last jobs to go will be plumbing.
Yes, exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
So what work, what's further sort of work that could be done by more than just an individual entrepreneur and family like Kindred to kind of help get young people to see that a career as a plumber or an electrician, my father-in-law did this for 35 years, is a very noble, respectable, and financially stable. You can do, like you said, you can do quite well by it.
Absolutely. So my father's a builder. My in-laws are all siding contractors. Some of my closest friends are in the trades. These are things that we need to celebrate. I was having a conversation with a friend just the other day. I'll leave him nameless, but we were joking around about what we wanted to do in our later years, and he's like, "Oh, I always thought millwork was fantastic. We'll call ourselves X and X and Sons." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's cool. Like, how about plumbing?" He's like, "Oh, no way. You can't be a plumber. That's not sexy." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's disappointing." But it truly is. That is the conception amongst most people that are, call it 40 years and up. You're exactly right that it's the drive towards getting your kids into university, get that post-secondary education, and then get a degree. What we're coming to see now is that very often those folks are saddled with debt, and they're getting jobs that aren't going to satisfy their financial needs going forward, and they are going to become obsolete with the continued ramp up with AI and other technology. We're a protected space outside of marketing or business development or proposal writing. People need to work with their hands in our industry. That will obviously change with robotics and the like going forward, but that's a very, very long runway. We need
the desk workers are going to lose their jobs before the plumbers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is grassroots to make kids see this as something that's fantastic. It's even before the trade schools or post-secondary educations, but it's as early as high schools. Europe has that program where as of grade 9 and 10, you can actually find yourself out on site working in an environment where you're becoming accustomed to what this industry presents. I think that we need to go that direction. And I think that we need to continue to foster the development of, putting people in front of this industry as a viable career option very, very early, and then being consistent up through the post-secondary space. Okay,
that's good. So to summarize, Bryan, it sounds to me like there's sort of a twofold solution to trying to address the labor shortage in the industry today. One is just culturally, let's try and get higher adoption rates locally by young people to see a path and a career path for themselves in the trades as opposed to, you know, like going to university per se. And but that still doesn't solve your issue of like seasoned tradespeople who know what they're doing. And to me, the only solution there is immigration.
Yes.
Like basically just pull them out of a different market. You know, that's their problem to deal with. But like if they can bring a plumber from the UK who's been here for 2 years, who's been contributing to our society and wants to stay here, like why? Like lay out the red carpet for this person to stay here. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's completely right. I think that if we're remarkably successful in both of those avenues, there will still be gaps. We're never going to be able to satisfy our current need. We're going to have to recognize that we'll be working with less than the required number of people for the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
We just will not catch up. And with that, there's going to have to, you know, accommodate some tech adoption and things that are going to allow us to build smarter that will hopefully offset that lack of staff.
Well, let's talk about that a bit more, because that is the third, I guess you could say, strategy, is just to, as I often say to my team here, in when you're doing your work, you need to first of all see if you can eliminate the work. Like if you don't have to do it, just eliminate it. If you can't eliminate it, automate it. And if you can't automate it, try and delegate it.
Right.
So eliminate, automate, delegate. So so certain things, obviously, in a construction project have to get done. Mm-hmm. What are you seeing right now that's kind of cool and interesting and neat in the automation space? Yeah,
so what we've realized we need to do is we need to build buildings before we build them. So that's integration of BIM primarily for us, which is building information modeling. And so what we're doing is we're utilizing various softwares in order to streamline any potential risks that may occur once we find ourselves on site. There are not enough people and there's not enough time, and things cost too much to fix issues when they're real world issues. We're hoping to unearth all of those in the design phase. So that's where we're investing a lot of time. That's where we're seeing tech really have a huge opportunity to benefit the lack of depth that we might have on the experience side. The other thing that we're seeing is a movement towards a lot of prefabrication components for all build forms. And that will go from, you know, floor cassettes and wall panels up to complete modularity, where you can build a building in a factory and it shows up with a TV on the wall. So from soup to nuts, you get an entire building complete that takes away the potential implications of weather and working with a bunch of trades that are, you know, on top of each other. It removes those obstacles. That's where we're seeing a lot of movement as well.
Okay. So prefabrication, there was a company that I think ended up going insolvent called Nexi, as an example. Is that what they were in that? Were they in that space? Yeah.
So Nexi was a prefabricated panel, and what they were was the exterior cladding system of any project. They looked, I believe, to spread sort of internationally here, Canada and down to the States. I'm not sure if we as a construction industry were ready for it. I think that it was the appropriate product in the right direction, and we need to ultimately get there. A conversation with a friend that I was having recently about this sort of thing was that Nexi was building something that needed to satisfy government requirements that were different everywhere, such that if you were Ford building a car, you'd have to create a car that could be built in one space, but yet had to qualify for different testing and licensing requirements in every single province and in every single state down in the United States. That's an impossible.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So next,
you know, Sir Bryan, for me to interrupt, but that's a great sort of analogy or parallel to like why we have issues today. Like the car companies are able to build a car in Oshawa, Ontario, that can be driven in New York City. It could be driven in Florida. It could be driven in, you know, Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, or Vancouver for that matter. Same car.
Absolutely.
But for you to build, probably even just from one municipality to another, there's probably all sorts of variables that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, I think that there's site-specific and area-specific things that are appropriate. So if you're in a seismic zone, of course, you're going to want to do something that's a little bit more robust, structurally, than you would if you were to build something in the middle of a field in perhaps Saskatchewan.
Okay.
But from an envelope perspective, I think that if we're comfortable in creating a somewhat ubiquitous program for how to put a wall together that has a window in it that's going to keep people dry and wet, then we should probably find ourselves doing that outside of very specific requirements provincially. I think that makes product adoption difficult when you look to span across a variety of spaces. That's why you'll have people that will do just the window, and they'll go, but we want nothing to do with the assembly. You go put it in the wall, and you build the wall however you want to build it. It makes it difficult for people to work within something that can be uniform.
Okay. Let me ask you about 3D building. I mean, I don't know if you've explored that. I've seen these videos on YouTube of small communities that are being built with these big machines, this tube of like concrete that just comes out.
Yeah, it looks pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. What's your take on that?
I think that there's space for everything. We're short on housing. We're short with hospitals, schools. Conventional old construction is not going to satisfy all of these needs. And so whether it is 3D printed homes, whether it is modular hotels, whether it is some form of building technology that allows us to make up time, I'm for all of it. We're the only industry in the world that I can walk into a room, explain to someone they're wrong because we've always done it a different way, and not get left out of the room. We are completely against adoption of tech. We do not like to be...
You're saying the industry as a whole has this culture of that?
It just is, regrettably. It's changing. The tide is changing as younger folks are coming up, and the industry as a whole is recognizing that we're falling short of what we needed to accomplish. But we build slower now than we did in the 60s. That doesn't make any sense. We need to get better, and if that's going to be in 3D printed homes or whatever the case may be in a small component in a small part of our industry, then I'm all for it.
Okay, great. Okay, well, those are some great solutions on labor supply. Let's jump to red tape and constraints related to permitting, that type of thing. Now, I appreciate that you're not the developer that's going out and doing all the paperwork. You're being hired to build,
right?
As you mentioned, you're like the factory that builds the car. Someone else has already done the approvals, but you still have to, obviously, I would assume your team still has to like deal with municipalities and wherever you're building,
right?
And because you've got certain what's the right word to describe the people who come and review your project, inspectors, and there's building code. Are building codes all provincial, or are there local building codes as well?
No, there's not. There's no Vancouver building code. Excuse me. There are requirements for passive house standards and the like that might be municipally driven that will change the manner in which you need to have assemblies. But no, the code is provincial.
Okay. BC is seen as a province that can hinder the private sector, particularly when it comes to construction. And I know that David Eby has made efforts to try and simplify this, at least when it comes to single-family homes. They passed this pretty amazing legislation, which basically says, I don't know what it was called exactly, the term, but it was basically said, if you have a single-family lot in British Columbia, no matter where your municipality, you can immediately convert that into a fourplex, and in some cases a sixplex if it's in a high transit area. Have you seen that have any positive impact in the building activity?
So we don't really play in that space. It's a little bit smaller than us. We are seeing more activity in smaller projects. We do get developers that are coming to us a lot more now than we ever had in the past, ask if we'll look at sort of a 2-lot assembly doing 12 units, a single 50-foot lot wanting to do 4 to 6.
What's the smallest number of units you would typically build?
Our small side would probably be low 30s.
Low 30s,
yeah.
Okay.
And most of those will be more of a bespoke collection of townhouses and the like, that it's a little bit more expensive and larger.
Right. As I've driven around the city over the last couple of years, driving my kids out to every single hockey rink you could possibly find. There's not that many, but they're all getting old themselves.
We do need more rinks.
We need more rinks, yeah. We haven't had a new ice hockey complex, net new, in like 45 years.
That's crazy.
It's nuts. But as I drive around, I'm seeing these amazing projects, and I think about the Cambie area, like Cambie and what is that, King Edward?
Sure.
That area. Like there's these assembly lots that have come together. I mean, this has happened over the last 10 years. And these beautiful, nice buildings. I mean, they're like 3 stories, maybe it's like 40, 50 units.
Yep.
Is this the kind of stuff you build?
We do.
Yeah.
Yep. So we did one just off of Cambie and King Ed on West 28th. like we just completed about a month ago.
Yeah.
That's for a company called Form Development. Damon Chan and Ryan Lomas. It was a pleasure to work with those guys. So that was a bespoke project that they were looking to satisfy that need for that empty nester looking to downsize a little bit. That for us is where we fit in on that smaller project typology.
Yeah.
Our roots are in that high-end space, and so we were able to sort of satisfy what they were looking for.
Yeah.
Our typical multifamily stuff veers a little bit bigger. We do some transit corridor-oriented stuff along Cambie, King Ed, Fraser, and the like. But most of it, we're finding ourselves sort of downtown a little bit more than we have in the past.
So let's talk a little bit more about the project you're doing, this mass timber project, because I find that very fascinating. And then it'll help us understand the challenges you face when it comes to red tape and bureaucracy. So this project is located on the corner of Burrard and Davie.
Yep.
So where it's which corner?
It was the old Money Mart.
Money Mart. Oh yeah, that location.
Yep.
Is it okay to disclose who the builders?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's a Vancouver City owned site.
Oh, okay.
Our client is the Community Land Trust.
Oh. Okay.
And so it's a non-market rental project that we are delivering on their behalf. And then the podium.
This is not through BC Housing.
It's a BC Housing Finance project.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So BC Housing Finance with a CMHC grant and City of Vancouver funded grants as well.
Okay.
And so it's got every single layer within it, municipal, provincial, and federal. It's a phenomenal model that we can hopefully replicate. Because it does create buy-in amongst everybody.
Okay.
The podium space is community center space for the LGBTQ community in the area.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it a mixed-use building?
Yeah. So there will be modest retail spaces. The primary additional use outside of the residential is the community center.
Okay, gotcha. And for context, how many floors, how many units will be in this building probably?
So I'm going to put my foot in my mouth when I guess the units. I believe it's 178.
So it's a decent size.
Yeah, it's 18-story timber building. Timber starts on the 4th floor.
Yeah.
And it's a concrete elevator core.
Yeah.
With structural steel members and mass timber floors.
Okay.
That project was greenlit in 2018, and
7 years ago.
And here we are today, with completion set for early 2027.
So it's 10 years to build that.
10 years.
Okay, this is great. Great. I love this. This is Exhibit A,
yeah, okay.
Right? So what's the name of the building? Do we have a name for it yet?
I don't know if there is a name just yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just call it the Mass Timber 1. So why is it taking 10 years? I mean, is it because of you guys? Because your labor shortages? You get to work late and leave early?
I would never admit that. No, it's not because of us. I think that there was a lot of hurdles to cross for approvals. There needed to be industry buy-in on the mass timber space. And so at the proposal stage, they had a lot of goals, they being the city and BC Housing, about what they wanted to achieve with this prototype project. Timber was a big part of it. Mass timber remains a more expensive building element than concrete. That will not be the case here soon, hopefully, but continues to be today. What we had to do was manage that design iterative process, the budgeting process, to ultimately get different levels of government approval and get funded. That was led by the team at Community Land Trust, Tiffany DeZita formerly, and then Manya, and they did a great job to getting there. It just took forever. To get 3 different layers of government to approve something is brutal. To get one to approve it is a challenge. And then once we finally got there, it just took time for then permits to be in place. And so design had to develop once we'd agreed on budgets and how we were going to move this project forward. We then weren't able to get any sort of special treatment or whatever the case may be to expedite a permit to help solve a housing crisis.
It sounds to me like this is mostly a municipal issue, and it's probably not just Vancouver, but maybe you're building in Vancouver. I know Ken Sim has talked about this idea of having, they call it, I think, 333 initiative, which was going to be like, if you did a basic renovation, you get your permitting and approval in like 3 days. If it's a larger project, it's like 3 weeks. And if it's a full rebuild, it's like 3 months. But I don't think any of that's come together. Are we still seeing major bottlenecks in approvals and permitting approvals in the city of Vancouver?
So, yes. I guess I have a bit of a different view on all of this. Even if they were to release every single permit that is currently being held up, there'd be nobody to build it anyways. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily the release of these permits that everybody's concerned about. It's the ability to rely on timeframe once you submit. Developers can't pro forma anything if there's this massive volatility in time frame. And so they might do really well and get something in 9 months. Conversely, it might take 4 years. And that sunk cost while carrying that property can be the death of a project. What I believe needs to happen is relative adjustment in what a building department is looking for, what plan checkers are looking for, so that we leave less up to a human element. If you're accomplishing what that site is set out to achieve, whether it's housing, schools, hospitals, you're within the framework of code, then I don't know, as long as it's not too outside of the ballpark, if we should really have much to say about, the artistic elements of the back of a building that are off of a lane. I think that we need to go towards a more utilitarian view of making sure that buildings are happening quickly as much as they're happening with as much of other people's input and impact as currently as possible. It's just holding everything up.
Mm-hmm. So I think this is why David Eby tried to make this shift in allowing a single-family lot to immediately be converted to a fourplex, as well as calling on all the municipalities in BC to set a housing initiative in place and then stick to it. And they have to basically report to the government as to why they're not hitting those numbers. Your projects are much larger in scale than a single-family lot going to a fourplex. Have you seen anything from our provincial government or by any municipality that's making it much easier to green light a project in the same way that they've done this? Because that's a great way to take a single-family lot and on a heavy corridor traffic area and turn it into a fourplex, or like you said, do an assembly lot. You've got 3 houses in a row. You assemble them together. You can do 4, maybe it's a high traffic area. So maybe you're doing 6 per lot. So 6 times 3. So you're doing 8, an 18 unit building.
Yeah.
So that's nothing compared to 150 units.
Right. So, an arm of BC Housing called BC Builds, so a provincial group, has worked with a number of municipalities to get pre-approved design. I think that that's a phenomenal step. And so Lisa Helps and her team there have done a great job in working with municipalities to identify lots that effectively builders or developers or owners or whomever can come in and say, we want to do what you've already approved on that lot, let us go. And it speeds everything up. It's a guaranteed project for that developer. They don't carry the risk of the potential rezoning. It makes things a lot more simple. I think that that's the direction that the province needs to go. One of the concerns that I had initially when Eby had stepped out to suggest that he was going to pull the discretion away from his city for approval of projects is that they didn't have anybody to do it if they did it. And so if they go, City of Vancouver, you're doing such a terrible job, we're now going to do it for you. They didn't have anybody. Right. So I wasn't sure exactly how that was going to play out.
Right.
Luckily, we haven't gotten there. I think most of the municipalities that they've reprimanded publicly have come to the table to make sure that they're trying to hit targets. Unfortunately, a lot of target thresholds are approved units and not completed units. And so they might approve rezonings for developers. They might approve DPs, but that doesn't mean that a shovel's in the ground, and that doesn't mean that a unit's complete and somebody can call it home. That lag in time frame is significant and a huge problem.
Mm. Are there municipalities in Metro Vancouver that are far more friendly to building and others that are not?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not the best person to answer that. We are quite fortunate that we get to deal with a project that's been approved and not the baggage that went into it. So somebody could have a terrible time in any one of the municipalities in the Lower Mainland and have a lot of scar tissue for it, and they hand it to us and we get a clean slate. And as long as the inspectors are good to deal with, we're afforded a pretty clear path.
But you must be, you got ears to, you know who the developers are. Yeah. It's so hard to get these developers to come on. They won't come on camera because, you know what, I'll tell you why. The reason they won't come on camera, and that's why I'm so glad to have you here, because at least you're giving us a little bit of insight, is their concern is if I start blasting City of Vancouver and Ken Sim and the ABC party for not making really any material changes to the permitting process, approval process. Next time I put a project in front of them for approval, I'm going to have like this big black mark against me. And I've literally had developers tell me, I'll tell you, but you can't say my name and I'll never go on camera.
Yeah, I'm sure. Historically, you had a lot of developers be pretty upset with the way Vancouver went through approvals. I think that things have gotten so bad that you are starting to see a lot more vocal folks in the development space. I think a really good example is Bo Jarvis with what he's been doing municipally, provincially, and federally with his campaigning. People are now fed up, and there has to be a.
If you don't know who Bo Jarvis is, give us some background.
President of West Group, one of the province's largest developers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they are a provider of homes, industrial space, retail space, workspace, and they got to the point where I think, as Bo described it, it was cost of delivery crisis. That was what made everything challenging, and one of those primary rationales for the cost of delivery was time, and it just became too onerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for us, Lower Mainland is relatively fine. Developers have been forced to work in the playground that is Vancouver. This is where our core is. This is where, the center of the Lower Mainland universe is. Surrey's battling for it, but, this is where people want to be.
Yeah.
What we're seeing, at least for us, is that a push into these ancillary markets, the Squamishes, the Langleys, and the like, because developers are going, I can do something a lot quicker, less expensive land.
Yeah.
And it's becoming a more affordable option anyways for those purchasers or renters at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's helpful. Helpful context. The last topic we want to speak about is BC Hydro. I normally like to try and finish these conversations on a positive note, but, I also want to be, realistic. And it seems to me like even if we can somehow solve the labor shortage issue through a combination of changing the culture to get more young people into the industry, immigrating the right kind of people that need to come in, having innovation and tech, and having your industry adopt it. Even if we can get the policymakers at the provincial and municipal levels to make it easier for builders, developers, general contractors to get their projects done, there's still one big issue here.
Sure.
Which is bringing power to the building.
Yes.
And in fact, last week when we did our pre-podcast call, you even referenced some project that I don't know if you have power there yet or not, but we
do. Yeah, we do.
When did you get it?
So we were ready for power in March, and we got it in August. So what we mean by ready for power is the building was effectively ready to go for occupancy. You cannot achieve occupancy without permanent power in place.
Right.
Life safety issues, making sure elevators work, et cetera. They're not willing to rely on generators. So we had to effectively demobilize from site and wait until hydro was ready. We had a very similar experience on a project on the west side of Vancouver for a much more modest building. This was for a private developer. We waited for 7 months from the time that we completed the building where we felt people would have been able to move in until hydro was able to come and show up. The layers within hydro are complex, and I don't pretend to know them all, but we've found that there's been a lack of ability to rely on timelines for all of them. And so when we start a project, one of the first things that we have to do is apply for permanent power, simultaneously request temporary power hookups if we're going to utilize those for that project. They're the driver. They're literally on critical path for us from day one. And what critical path means is that it's the line that your project follows. The things that fall outside of that obviously need to get completed, but they're not going to drive your completion date. Hydro is on our critical path from day one on all of our projects.
Is it?
That was not the case 12 years ago. The problem has become much more significant and acute since COVID. I believe that they had, sort of loss of staff at that time, and they've been unable to really catch up. And as the pace of building and development here has increased, they're obviously just snowed under. And so nobody wants to take too long to do their job or do a poor job. I just don't believe that they're provided the tools to do it. They need a lot more people, and they need to change their systems because what's happening now is just absolutely awful.
Really?
We're not unique. This is happening to every single developer. You have to rely on BC Hydro to do a design for your permanent power. So outside of your purview, your ability to manage is a black box that is hopefully doing the design work, while you then have to wait to then receive it, work it into your plans, submit it to then achieve permanent power in an appropriate time frame. And It's been massively challenging to do that.
So my simple question when it comes to BC Hydro, do you believe the issue is more red tape bureaucracy, and it sounds like maybe even a shortage of staff, or is it stem from internal operational challenges like just grid issues?
It might be all three, where we have not yet come up against a grid issue where we weren't able to solve it if there was the ability to work with BC Hydro early. And so developers are tasked with making sure that there's appropriate power to satisfy what they're going to build. That's part of very early stage discussions with the municipalities and with BC Hydro. So that shouldn't be a significant issue as long as there's foresight and people are actually looking at it. What we find is that you might not get an audience for people to even look at it. That process needs to change. The engagement with Hydro.
When you say audience, you mean you can't even get somebody at Hydro to like actually just show up on site or spend the 20 hour.
That early on engagement to review plans and make sure that they're going to work. I think that accountability and visibility allows people to do their job more efficiently and better. It creates a level of satisfaction in knowing that you're a part of a project from beginning to the end, and you've helped deliver something that's going to benefit the community for which you live and work in. I don't think that that's any different or shouldn't be any different for Hydro versus one of my staff. And so if my project manager is tasked with being responsible from taking a project from A to Z, I don't know why we're not able to request the same from municipalities and Hydro in order to ensure that they're committed and invested in delivering a successful project. When you're handed off multiple times within a government agency, you're just not going to get a good approach. And we're finding that with Hydro and the municipalities.
To your knowledge, Bryan, are there any particular municipality? Maybe this question isn't even relevant now because you've just explained to me that the issue seems to be more around getting just someone's attention at Hydro in the first place for a project. But you'd also mentioned a little bit earlier about Langley as an example, a very fast-growing community, Surrey, versus, say, Vancouver proper. Are there certain municipalities where it's just easier to get projects done through, get Hydro on board than others?
Well, we have very modest experience in Okanagan, and we found that to be an area that's been phenomenal. And that might just be because of management up there.
Isn't the Okanagan, isn't there power run by Fortis, though?
So we're working with Hydro in Revelstoke.
Oh.
So that for us has been a great experience.
Right.
We rely quite often on electrical and mechanical contractors to foster those relationships and work with us to help facilitate it. And in this instance, a group called Chapman has just been great, like literally picking up the phone and getting responses from somebody that day. Whereas we're like sending emails into the ether and just hoping that you get something back.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So
okay. So whether you're building in Burnaby, Vancouver, or Richmond, it's all the same problem.
It's all the same. Unfortunately.
Yeah. I do like to finish off on a positive note. So let's at least have her, because I mean this has been pretty somber listening to how bad this is. I'd have
no. I'm a positive guy. I'm a glass half full. Without that approach in this industry, it would be a challenging space to make a living. Yeah,
absolutely. So here's a question for you that what I love is these phenomenal looking buildings. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't appreciate is how much computer technology at the early stages of designing a property. You can get these creative people who can go now with AI, it's even another level, but get these creative people who can go on some CAD drawing and they can come up with some really, like the butterfly building, right? Come up with some really crazy designs and fun designs, like the building you did that had the sort of call out to the sails of a sailboat. And they hand those off to some structural engineers to just make sure it can hold its weight.
Yeah.
And then off you go.
Yeah.
And you and your family have been in this business for a long time. Yes, we could have built buildings a lot faster in the 1960s, but they were kind of like, pretty block-like, small windows. So what are you excited about as far as seeing these new designs? Do you take a similar view? Like this is kind of fun to see these nice, beautiful buildings being built?
Absolutely. I think that the ingenuity architecturally, structurally, is something that will allow us to continue to have these buildings that we couldn't have imagined being feasible sort of the decade earlier.
Yeah.
You mentioned a West Bank building. I appreciate developers that go to the lengths to have something that's architecturally significant, because it's no easy feat and it's expensive, and it makes cities better. I believe that will continue. I think that what we are finding is that people are going ultra bespoke. So, the last iteration of what was to be the Vancouver Art Gallery was one of the most bespoke architectural approaches ever. It's a shame that it didn't happen, but whatever happens next, I'm sure will be equally brilliant.
Yeah.
I think that that's the direction we're going. So the community mindful space where you can have federal, provincial, municipal money behind it so that there doesn't necessarily need to be a correlation to revenue behind what you're spending, because truly these buildings are insanely expensive.
Yeah.
But anybody that's willing to invest in that space is just like, I love them.
Yeah.
We're going to continue on Kindred's side to continue to try to support those. One area that we do get to is the custom home space.
There's some beautiful custom homes being built too.
This province is delivering some of the best homes in the world right now, and that's where people are really sort of able to stretch their imaginations on what architects can come up with.
Yeah. Any projects that you have that are in the pipeline that kind of fit that description? Maybe not a private home, but like any other. I mean, you mentioned these two mass timber buildings, but are there any other projects that you guys are excited about, hopefully seeing come to fruition?
Well, I don't know if we've got any arrows in the quiver that are that exceptionally bespoke, architecturally significant space. We've found ourselves as being a provider of homes and a group that is focused on helping solve this super acute crisis that we're facing throughout our province and throughout our country. I think appropriately, those buildings do not find themselves doing these really crazy, wild things.
Of course, that makes sense. Yeah.
So while we are able to, work in elements, some indigeneity in a lot of the spaces that we're working within, and some really cool spaces on the exterior of the building, we try to be somewhat approachable in making sure that the numbers work for these buildings. And our goal is to put people in the houses, and if we get to make them beautiful as well, then that's fantastic.
Yeah, well said. Is there anybody in the industry, maybe not even in the construction industry, but maybe in government, where you'd almost do a call out to the great work that they're doing? Is there anybody who's kind of like sees the vision and they're kind of being a bushwhacker, making building new roads for companies like yours to kind of get all rental projects or social housing, or things that are addressing not just the high end of the market that can pay for it privately, but also the harder to home house?
Our not-for-profit clients are unbelievable people, and what is often thankless work. They serve a group of our community that is often overlooked, and they do the best work, and it's absolutely phenomenal to see. I think from a government perspective, I haven't yet identified somebody that is sort of that white knight riding in to save the day and clearing all of the obstacles. What I am encouraged to see is that all levels of government seem to recognize that there's problems that need to be fixed, and they're committed to do that. While I might not agree with Build Canada Homes, I'm thankful to see that there's at least an announcement of a platform.
Right.
I'm encouraged to see that he's going to invest, or that this government will invest in prefabrication space and modularity space, and in opening up property that's federally owned in order to solve some of the issues that we face. I think that a lot of the rationale behind what David Eby is doing is great. The BC Builds is a phenomenal program. I think that that's absolutely fantastic. It's been very successful in a short time frame. Lisa Helps has been phenomenal. BC Housing continues to do the hard yards. They've got a tough road ahead of them, just because of the acute need that they face. And then municipality, it's difficult for all of them. But I'm encouraged to see that they all recognize that they've got to have a part to play.
Yeah. Okay. Well said. Okay. My last question, going back to mass timber. This is probably a silly question, but does the mass timber that you're using, is it actually BC timber?
So in most instances, yes. There's a company called Kolesnikov. Kolesnikov's a long, multiple generation timber family. They've created their own mass timber facility where they're creating the panels that we're installing on most of our buildings. That's phenomenal. We do need more. And so Mercer is a group that has recently moved into the space here locally. They're an American-based company, but have opened up something in the interior of BC just because we need more. Having one shop for any component that's super critical is challenging for anybody. So yes, in most instances, we're using BC wood.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what is actually in a mass timber product? Is it just wood, or is there other components?
No, so there's different types of mass timber. So there's a product called DLT, which is dowel laminated timber. So you'll have a bunch of timber stacked together with dowels through it that will hold it together. You will have glue that's utilized in a lot of components of mass timber. You'll have nail laminated timber that will make up mass timber components. And so it's sort of, mass timber is a catch-all for a form of lumber that ties a bunch of individual pieces together.
Okay, great. That's a good little 101 on mass timber. Appreciate that. Bryan Reid, president of Kindred Construction, talking about the challenges that builders are going through in Metro Vancouver and BC today. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for being on Coastal Front. Thank you for all the good work that you're doing in building these wonderful looking buildings and homes. And best of luck for you in the future.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.